In today's video, we have the latest NHL rumors from around the league. We're looking at the update on John Gibson. What's going on with his trade request in Anaheim? Will the St. Louis Blues still look to move defenseman Torrey Krug? What is Ottawa doing to clear some cap space? And are they any closer to signing RFA centerman Shea Pinto? Where could Patrick Kane end up? A new rumor surfaced today with one of the potential landing spots. And we have a whole bunch of information from former Islanders GM Garth spilling the beans on a lot of the things that went down during his time as GM, including John Tavares leaving and some other draft selections and more. All that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of things to take a look at today. I want to kick things off starting with the Garth podcast interview. He recently appeared back in the last week or so on the podcast hosted by Andy Strickland and Cam Jansen, and it was certainly made a lot of interesting comments and kind of spilled some tea on some interesting decisions or lack thereof that were made during his time as the GM of the New York Islanders. So, for example, a couple of things that were discussed that we now know a little bit more. The whole John Tavares exit. I know a lot of fans were really upset over how things ended, of course, losing their franchise player. Clearly, though, even the year after he left, they seem to get better, which is, and they've been pretty competitive since. Obviously, and at this stage now, they're pretty much, there's a few changes, but a lot of the same pieces are in place, and clearly getting to be an older team, and they may have kind of peaked already and kind of need some change. I think a lot of people think about the Islanders, and Lou hasn't really provided that, but certainly they went on to have at least some competitive years, some deep playoff runs, which is more than a lot of people thought. A lot of people thought the sky was falling and the Islanders were doomed for the basement after losing their former first overall and franchise player. That didn't happen. So the team was certainly better off than a lot of people thought. But as far as what went down, I know a lot of fans were upset because Tavares said all the right things. I want to be an Islander. He never really let on like he was intention of leaving, which he's not going to do anyway. But still, after the way things went down, I know fans, I think some felt betrayed. Some wondered, why did we not trade him? And Garth Snow finally answered that question, saying that ownership and Scott Malkin made it clear that they were not going to trade John Tavares. And I guess the hope was, and the thought process was, that if you trade him, he's not coming back via free agency. At least that was the feeling. So clearly ownership made that choice not to do that. Now, of course, John Tavares, I know, basically said all the things to stay with the Islanders. He didn't really want to be traded either. And I do wonder, I don't really know for sure what was going through his mind, obviously, going into free agency. If his intention all along was to leave, we don't know. I mean, because you don't know what offers are going to come along, right? If some of the other teams don't make those offers, which you couldn't have predicted, maybe he doesn't leave. But obviously, he went home to the Leafs. The San Jose Sharks actually offered more money than Toronto, and he went to Toronto to fulfill his boyhood dream, as we know. But certainly that choice not to trade him at the deadline was a choice of ownership, not of management, according to former general manager Garth Snow. Another trade that was discussed, and we now can confirm was indeed on the table to some extent, and was having, they did have some discussions around it, but I know when Travis Hamonic wanted to be moved out of the Islanders organization before he ended up going to the Flames, there was some talk that there were some rumors about him going to the Edmonton Oilers, and the rumor was it was going to be traded for Taylor Hall. Obviously, at that point, we know the Islanders and the Oilers did indeed have conversations, according to what we got confirmed here from Snow, but it said it wasn't really all that close. So the discussions were not really all that serious. Clearly, Hamonic ended up going to Calgary. Hall was not long after traded as well, when he was traded to New Jersey for Adam Larson. And the other big thing that we learned as well, which was interesting, was that the 2014 NHL draft, unfortunately, the Islanders had a pretty high pick. When you're in the top 5, those picks really need to land, and they really need to be, selecting the right players, because it can set you up really, really well. And this pick for them ended up being a bust, and that's Michael Del Cole. Obviously he came out of junior with a lot of, good-looking stats. There was lots to like about Del Cole as a player. I do think there were some red flags, though, based on what we knew about the player at the time. And the Islanders didn't really look, into other directions that they should have. So essentially, one player that the scouting staff was pushing for, which we can confirm now, was Nikolai Ehlers, who ended up going a few picks later to the Winnipeg Jets. Of course, a few other top names that were also on the board include William Nylander and Kevin Fiala. So certainly, lots of picks there that were well underway and having the prime of their careers right now and are way stronger players, where Dal Cole is, done in the league and never really amounted to much of anything, unfortunately. Played, brief bottom six roles at times and never really could make the most of his NHL opportunity, unfortunately. So can you imagine if they would have gotten Nick Ehlers or William Nylander? They certainly could have injected a nice young player into their lineup some time ago. I mean, would that have impacted the John Tavares situation? It certainly could have, or at the very least could have impacted how well they've done in the playoffs. After Tavares left and they had some good runs, having another top young offensive player like that could have made a huge difference. And the main reason that Garth Snow went with Dal Cole over the scouts' recommendations of Nick Ehlers was that he didn't have a good relationship with Ehlers, his rep, his agent. It was that simple. He had the same agent as Nino Niederreiter, and they ran into some issues. And because of that, he wouldn't pick him. That, to me, was a pretty bad move. I mean, you can't look at who the agent is of a prospect when you're doing the draft. You need to look at the draft pick's talent and who's going to fit and help your team, who's the best player available. You worry about that other stuff later. I mean, that's crazy. I mean, like William Nylander has an agent who's known to be quite difficult to work with as well. So, I mean, still, you don't shy away from guys like that. You try to make it work. And at the end of the day, you took a player who ended up being a bust. I mean, I don't know that you could have predicted he was going to be a bust, or anybody else would have for that matter either. But like I said, there was certainly a few more red flags with Dal Cole than there were with some of these other guys who were kind of viewed upon as being more of a surefire hit. But at the end of the day, it's interesting to hear, people from the NHL management circles speak down the road after they're no longer in their roles. The draft selection, of Dal Cole was a big one for me. That was a big no-no. Obviously, if he could have picked up Hall for Hamonic, that would have been a huge win. And really, ownership not given the green light to even consider trading Tavares was certainly a bad move, knowing in retrospect, of course, what ended up happening not long after. Another rumor around the landing spot for Patrick Kane. Of course, we've seen an interview with him just a few days ago talking about how he's getting close to being healthy. He's feeling a lot better, happy with his progress. He's on the ice skating and certainly feeling way better and is quite pleased with everything, which is good news. Certainly sounds like he's still going to be on the same kind of timeline. He won't be ready to start the season in October, but it shouldn't be too long after when he is ready. He said if he really wanted to rush things, he could probably make it work, but it probably wasn't in his best interest to do so. And clearly he's willing to entertain offers at this point. If he likes the situation and he likes the offer and it's a good for him, then he'll certainly consider it. And one speculation that came up today that I've seen on social media was him landing with the Detroit Red Wings because he really wanted to be reunited with Alex DeBrincat. Of course, they're longtime teammates in Chicago for a few years, had terrific chemistry. Obviously, DeBrincat was traded to Ottawa, and then knowing, Kane would have known that DeBrincat didn't have a long-term deal, so knew regardless of how things went in Ottawa, there was a possibility that he may or may not move again in a year or two. And now that he's in Detroit, there's some speculation that Kane may want to go there to play with him. Certainly they could have a pretty great All-American line with Kane, DeBrincat, and Larkin. That would be a pretty awesome top line. I mean, you still have guys like Lucas Raymond, obviously, JT Compher, David Perron, etc., Andrew Kopp in the mix there within your top nine. So, I mean, really, Kane would be a huge addition. They have technically the space. They get over $5 million in space. They have room. They could do it. Is that rumor true? I guess only time will tell if they'll be in the mix here to possibly sign Patrick Kane and bring him in. And of course, I'm assuming it's going to be a one-year deal after coming off a big hip surgery that he's had, and see how things go. Rumor has it regarding the Senators and Shea Pinto. Of course, he's one of the other top RFA names that remains unsigned at this point. Bruce Garrick of the Ottawa Sun had an article out here in the last 48 hours talking about the fact of it was a variety of things discussed in the interview, including including ownership, being close to being finalized. Interviewed DJ Smith about the upcoming season and talked about the fact that Shane Pinto is still not signed. And according to Bruce, he says they're not close on a contract as of yet. There's still a good gap between the two. But even though there is still 3 weeks before the season kicks off training camp, so obviously they're still feeling hopeful and optimistic that they'll come to an agreement and get something done before training camp so he doesn't miss any time. That would be ideal. Clearly, though, the Senators do need to create a little bit of salary cap flexibility after signing Vladimir Tarasenko and some of the other moves they made this offseason. And, it's still expected they're going to have to probably trade at least one contract out to create a little bit of extra cap flexibility. And whether that's Matthew Joseph or Eric Brandstrom or one of those guys is what people have been saying and expecting for some time. Nothing's happened as of yet. So we'll have to see. They do also need to sign Igor Sokolov as well, who's going to be fighting for a bottom six role when training camp opens. But we'll see how Pierre Dorion and the Senators decide to create some space, and hopefully they can get Pinto signed in the not too distant future. Hockey News has a new article out talking about John Gibson. Of course, the fact that how quiet it's been. I mean, we know that John Gibson reportedly had asked for a trade, and this is not the first time it's come up. Frank Saravalli had that out at the beginning of the offseason quite some time ago, and really for a while there seemed to be some traction, and before obviously as we get into free agency, especially because there was a lot of teams that were looking for goaltending moves. I mean, even a team like Pittsburgh went into free agency and ended up signing their own guy in Tristan Jarry, but there was a lot of question marks and uncertainty in a number of NHL markets between the pipes there, between the draft and free agent period opening, and then really once a lot of those questions started to kind of get answered and teams kind of finding their solutions within a short period of time, a lot of those opportunities kind of closed off, and it's been very eerily quiet on Gibson. The Hockey News article kind of suggests wondering if maybe has he changed his mind, or did the moves that the Ducks made this offseason kind of made him think, well, maybe we'll be more competitive and the rebuild will be more, taking a good step forward and maybe I want to stay. I honestly don't think that's the case. I don't personally see the moves they made as taking a big step forward. I mean, they're kids and they're young players in the organization. I expect to take some more steps this year, and I do think those players can take steps forward. I don't know as a team they're going to take a whole lot of a step forward, though, to be honest. And at this point, I think it was just too difficult to trade because he had too much term left on his contract. And like I said, a lot of other teams found solutions without having to give up the price that the asking price would be for Gibson or to take on that contract. So I personally think a team like LA, which is really close to LA, or to Anaheim, in the same division, might be a team to look to in the near future. If you look around all the teams that are expected to be, competing for playoffs, and teams that certainly most, feel like is pretty much as close to being a lock as you can think, predicting the regular season, I think LA is one of the biggest question marks in goal with Cam Talbot and Phoenix Copley. I don't know. I mean, Talbot was inconsistent last year, was getting hurt a lot. If that continues for him, I mean, obviously he was in Ottawa, but if that same sort of play in injury history continues now in LA for this year, that's going to create a big hole. And the LA Kings are a team that, besides their goaltending, I feel quite confident they have a really good team and can certainly, be a top, team to fight in the Western Conference. But without the goaltending, it's going to be hard to do. And I can see them addressing that as the season gets going here if it's not going well. So Gibson could be a target for division rivals like LA. Otherwise, it's hard to imagine where he could go in season, but we'll see. But it has been quiet on the Gibson front, that's for sure. But I don't think it's because of him rescinding his request. I think it's just been too challenging and difficult for them to figure out a solution to satisfy the request. So we'll see. Word is as well that the St. Louis Blues would still like to move defenseman Torrey Krug, although that's proven difficult because of the trade protection that Doug Armstrong gave Krug, but they're still actively trying and considering to do that before the season gets underway. But the belief is that players like Torrey Krug probably won't be moved if he's still there when the season starts. So if we don't see something in the next 3 to 4 weeks, then it's probably not going to happen. So Krug essentially can obviously control a lot of his own destiny. He declined a trade to Philadelphia. I think a team like, if he was able to go back to Boston, for example, I think he might be interested in that. Otherwise, it's hard to say. I mean, he has the control and probably doesn't want to uproot his family, which you can understand, but certainly the Blues want to shake up that decor, and it's been proving extremely difficult, and they're still trying, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a challenge for sure. But the belief is Krug won't even come close to entertaining waiving during the season. If they give them the right deal before the season starts, maybe that'll be their only chance, and there is word that they're working away at that, but it's hard to say if they'll find a solution or not. I certainly have my doubts that they will, but we'll see if they get something figured out. So let me know your thoughts on all today's news and rumors down in the comments, and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.